Making news earlier this month, there were some movements in something that's called the world of non-competes, which is really kind of an interesting thing. There was a lot of activity. It was making a lot of news in the beginning of the month, and then all of a sudden, there was some sort of block that happened. And now the future of the non-compete, not only here in New Jersey, but really everywhere, is rather uncertain. And joining me this morning to just provide some really good information about this and maybe just to clarify a little bit, a member with Brach Eichler, located here in New Jersey. Labor and employment law is right in his wheelhouse. And I'm going to welcome in Jay Sabin to the program. Let me just remind everybody first that this is strictly informational. This is not an endorsement. This is not legal advice either, but just strictly informational this morning, our conversation. Jay, good morning. Welcome to WRNJ Radio in New Jersey. How you doing today?
Good morning to you and your listeners.
Thank you for being here. I guess the first thing is, maybe people have heard the term non-compete and maybe they think they know what it is. Maybe they're just not really sure. Is there an easy definition of what a non-compete is? And does it differ from like an employment contract, Jay? Are there differences there?
What non-competes are is that companies have confidential information. They have a know-how, a secret way, a secret sauce of doing business. And what they don't want to have happen is when they impart that knowledge to their workers, to have that used against them. And that's what a non-compete does. It says you have knowledge about how we do business, knowledge that's not public. And for some period of time, you can't leverage that knowledge after you leave our services to our detriment.
Now, how does that differ, Jay, between that and something called, that I've had to deal with over time in my career here in broadcasting and media, something called an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement? Are there differences between the two?
This is like Baskin-Robbins. It comes in lots of different flavors. You can have non-disclosure, which means you can't disclose or use confidential information. You could have something called a non-solicitation. That means you won't go out and ask any of our employees or our vendors to break their contract with us or to not work with us anymore. And then the core of it is a non-compete, that you won't provide your services, an individual, to a company that competes against us.
Gotcha. So why was there need for legislation for this, Jay? Can't this just be an agreement between a company and the ownership and the employees who work there? Why did legislation have to get involved in terms of how non-competes are handled?
That's exactly what a lot of companies asked when the federal government came out with a rule last April saying that for the most part, non-competes would no longer be enforceable. And once that rule came out, the lawyers flew down to Texas, went into court, looked for some Texas justice, and they got it. And a few weeks before this non-compete rule was to go into effect, a judge in Texas said that the rule is not enforceable and can't be enforced nationwide.
Interesting. Now, there used to be a thing, and Jay, I don't know if this is still the deal. Jay Sabin is my guest this morning. We're talking about the world of non-competes. There used to be, I don't know if this was ever a thing or not, but unless you were compensated, unless you as an employee received some sort of compensation, a non-compete agreement was non-binding. Is that true, and was that ever true?
Here's what everyone listening should understand. If you work for business, you're in management, and you are thinking about putting out a non-compete or you have a non-compete already on record, don't think it's enforceable. It may not be. Just because it's in writing doesn't mean it's enforceable. And the same is true. If you're listening and you're an employee and you've been required to sign a non-compete, just because it's in writing doesn't necessarily mean it's enforceable.
That's very interesting. Jay Sabin is my guest this morning with Brach Eichler, practicing here in New Jersey. There was news at the beginning of the month regarding non-competes and some changes, and Jay just kind of did a great job there of updating us as to where this stands today. Jay, are there more, I don't know if it's popular industries or more where a non-compete has much more at stake than it does for other things? Like what industries do we see non-competes almost a regular part of doing business? Are there any industries, maybe some things in New Jersey that come to mind where non-compete is just like the regular cost of doing business, like almost filling out an employment application?
If you went and knocked on the doors of a pharmaceutical company or a manufacturing company, a logistics company, a healthcare organization, you're probably going to find non-competes in place. And really where the trend lines are is not at the federal level. It's not this federal rule that will probably never be enforced. But where we're seeing it is at the state level. Different states, including New Jersey, have considered legislating what type of non-compete can be enforceable, what type of non-compete can be put out there. A lot of times the lines are being drawn at certain compensation levels or certain job duties. And what we're also seeing is, because of the shift in thinking about non-competes, a lot of judges are less inclined to enforce a non-compete as written.
Interesting. And is this is our federal statutes, Jay, or do these laws vary from state to state?
It's absolutely state to state, and that was one of the unusual things about the federal rule. That would have been uniform across the country. Now we're going to go back when we're advising our clients, which include companies and individuals. You have to look at the state where you're working, and whether or not there's any rules and what are the parameters of whether or not compete is enforceable.
Interesting. And I'm glad you broke it down in a couple of different industries where this is such an important thing. When you mentioned pharmaceutical, I mean, talk about proprietary information where maybe someone developing a new drug or a new treatment or something that they've invested years and millions of dollars in. There's got to be some degree of confidentiality, and this non-compete probably comes in handy there. I think about maybe a couple of other industries. I could be a small business owner, Jay, and someone who works for me says, you know what, Bert, I don't want to work for you anymore. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to sell the same thing that you are. But I could say, well, you signed a non-compete, so you can't go after any of my customers for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Does that exist? Is that a basic example of what a non-compete might work?
If you're a business owner, if you're a successful business owner, you have a certain way about how you do business that you don't make public. It's your secret sauce. That's a defensible and protectable interest. How to protect it, how to defend it, well, the secret's in the details there.
All right. That's very interesting, because it'd be like I make chocolate and someone says, Bert, well, I have the recipe for your chocolate. I'm going to go sell my own now and use your formula. I would want like a non-compete or some sort of confidentiality, because I don't want somebody selling my chocolate. That's mine, right? Even something like that.
One of the classic cases was that someone who knew the formula for Thomas English muffins went to go work for a competitor, and the company responsible for bakes Thomas English muffins said, oh, no, that's a highly secret, highly confidential baking process. We can't have you go work for a competitor.
Interesting. Nooks and crannies, they don't make themselves. I mean, there's got to be a recipe for that. You're right.
I think you're making us and our listeners hungry this morning.
I go for one with some melted butter on it right now. Jay Sabin, this has been really good information. Thank you for joining me here today. Is there somewhere where people can go and maybe get some more information? And I know you got some things online. Where can someone go to just get some more details about what we talked today? Because I feel like we just skimmed the surface on how this whole thing works.
I'm found at BrachEichler.com. People can also go on to the internet and find lots of information about non-competes from the government agency that put out the rule, the Federal Trade Commission, ftc.gov as well. All
right, we'll be sure to take a look. Now I got to go get an English muffin, but Jay Sabin, thank you. Great information this morning. Thank you for your flexibility, too. I know we've had to reschedule you at least once to get to this segment today, but thank you for the really great information, and have a terrific weekend. And please keep us updated as things move along with this.